Of course, we begin with our big story here. 3 much anticipated reports on climate change are all out today, painting a grim picture for humanity's future if action isn't taken soon. In fact, one study from the United Nations reports that carbon emissions must be 43% below 2019 levels to meet goals under the Paris Climate Agreement. But it shows current commitments are only on track to reach 2%. Another new report, the National Climate Assessment from the federal government, comes out every 4 to 5 years, and it shows that America is warming about 60% faster than the world as a whole. And according to that study, in 1980, adjusted for inflation, $1 billion weather disaster struck the U.S. once every 4 months on average, and now it's every 3 weeks. President Biden today saying that natural disasters cost America $178 billion last year alone. And then he announced $6 billion in new investments to help combat this crisis. So joining us now is John Podesta, live from the White House. He is the senior advisor to President Biden for clean energy innovation and implementation. Mr. Podesta, thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate your time. And look, right out of the gates here, when we talk, of course, when we talk about these huge numbers here, is $6 billion enough? I mean, is that just a drop in the bucket compared to the kind of funds we really need to deal with this?
Well, first of all, it's a very important funding to strengthen our power grid, to deal with the drought in the West, to make environmental justice grants in communities across the country, to preserve our national parks. But it is only part of the money that has been authorized by the Congress through the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law, which make the largest investment in clean energy and tackling climate change, not just in the history of the United States, but in the history of the world. So that's a comprehensive program, and we're seeing action really across the country. One of the things I think that this new National Climate Assessment pointed out was that even though every region is experiencing worsening effects of climate change, we're also seeing more action across the entire country with deployment of clean energy resources like wind and solar, a boost in the number in trying to decarbonize transportation through the purchase of electric vehicles. So there's good things happening as well.
Well, the president today, though, slamming what he called MAGA Republicans and former President Trump for disputing the impacts of global warming altogether. Has the time passed, though, for partisan politics here? I mean, is there any room for compromise with Republicans? And if not, isn't it up to Democrats in the White House to provide more outreach here?
Yeah, well, I would hope it would be time passed. When you look at the actual science, when you see the effects of extreme weather, that we'd be past the time for that kind of politics. But, you know, you do have to remember that President Trump tried to bury this report when it came out under his administration in 2018 and continues to really deny the effects of climate change. But having said that, look, I think we need to come together as a country, across party, and try to make the right kind of choices for the American people. You know, when I talk to Republican governors across the country, they're excited about the opportunities to see new manufacturing come to their states, to build out more wind, more solar, more EV and battery factories, more production, putting Americans to work in good paying jobs. So I think we can come together and have a good dialogue about this. And I think one of the things about this assessment is because it's really nonpartisan, 750 leading scientists and experts putting together the best approach, the best knowledge about what's happening down to the county level. You can see really what's happening in your own community, and hopefully that'll spark a constructive debate across the political spectrum.
Right, small changes could turn into really big ones. President Biden, as you know, is landing in San Francisco today for the APEC summit, and he is set to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping tomorrow. This new national climate assessment, though, it shows that while China emits more than the U.S. right now, our country is still responsible for the most legacy emissions and is indirectly responsible for China's emissions because of our consumption of these goods. So the question to you here is, do you think that during this meeting they have, he could effectively, you know, persuade him to come to the table and have better access and better plans in terms of the climate?
Well, look, there's a long history of dialogue between the U.S. and China going back to the Obama administration. But it's clear that China needs to do more. They're still building new coal-fired power plants. They need to stop doing that and begin to retire their old coal-fired power. And I know that the president intends to have a dialogue with President Xi to see if together they can recommit to ensure that the effects of, as you noted, the world's largest historic emitter, but now China emits nearly twice as the emissions that the United States does. So we both need to get on with the process of trying to provide more sustainable futures for our people. And I think we're doing that in a more competitive environment right now, but still I think there's a room for dialogue to ensure that both countries are taking action.
Certainly, and now is the time to do it. Also, the president's push on electric vehicles, it was a huge sticking point during the auto industry strike, workers expressing fears that they would be left behind, and they were claiming that billions of dollars in subsidies failed to trickle down to them. These EVs also requiring those lithium mining for batteries. That's a sector that China really dominates globally. So when do EV investments really start to pay off environmentally and financially?
Well, look, I think we're seeing that already. We're up to nearly 10% of new car sales are electric vehicles. I think when you think about the auto strike, what came out of that was probably the best contract in history, really historic achievement for the UAW and auto workers, and a recommitment to, for example, the president was out in Belvidere, Illinois, to reopen that plant, which had been announced that Stellantis was shuttering it. Now they're reopening it along with a battery factory out there. So that's a good future for the company, but it's also a great future for workers who'll be put to work making new electric vehicles out there, building batteries in Belvidere, Illinois, with support of the Inflation Reduction Act that the president passed and support from the state of Illinois and Governor Pritzker's efforts out there. So I think that's a really actually a good news story. And I think that when it comes to lithium, we just saw an announcement from Exxon that they're investing substantial amounts of money to not just drill for oil, but now drill for lithium, as it were. They're using their knowledge and technology to drill in Arkansas and recover lithium that are in brines deep under the ground. We're seeing development of mines out in Nevada, extraction of lithium from the Salton Sea in California. So I think we're on track to be able to meet the needs of the United States without over-reliance on the Chinese supply chains. That's a big challenge because they did control a lot of the supply of critical minerals, but I think we're working with our friends, our allies, and our partners in Europe and other countries in Asia to ensure that we have safe and secure supplies and that those vehicles and batteries are made here in the USA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an important sticking point. John Podesta, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. I want to bring our big story to our panel now. So joining us today is our former Republican congressman from New York, John Katko, Democratic strategist Pili Tobar, and ABC News contributor and op-ed columnist for the Los Angeles Times, LZ Granderson, and senior White House correspondent Selena Wang, who is traveling with the president in San Francisco. Thank you all for being here with us. So, John, we'll start here with you. Look, this document that we're talking about today, it has no policy suggestions. It really leaves it up to lawmakers. But you just heard him talking about how he spoke with Republican lawmakers throughout this nation, and some of them expressed excitement on some of these changes that can be made. Do you think that they'll use this information in a good way?
I think so, and I think we all have to accept that climate change is real, and I led an effort on the Republican side when I was in Congress to do just that. And, you know, we got to applaud what the U.S. has been doing in the last several years, in the last several decades. What we're doing is working. We got to continue to do that. But we need to level the playing field worldwide. And if you heard what Mr. Podesta said, China, up until 2030, can build as many coal-burning plants as they want, and they don't have to come in compliance with the Paris Accords, and they can reach their peak of pollution levels in 2030, while the rest of the world, like the U.S., has to come to compliance now. we got to figure out a way to make globally what we're doing in the U.S. stick globally. And I think we can do it. And there's ways to do it. I mean, for example, there's been a carbon tax talked about for offending countries to incentivize them to get their act together. But we all need to work together on a worldwide basis. And China and U.S. need to lead the way. But right now, China is still building coal-burning plants, and they're still polluting at a level that's unprecedented.
Right. And Peely, Forbes study said that there's actually 1/3 of Americans that are saying climate change would be a reason to pick up and move from where they're currently living. That is an issue that is really reshaping our country. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen how the effects of climate change have started to affect more and more of the U.S. population, whether it's through wildfires or through floods and a variety of other things. And that is not going to slow down. We've seen that across the globe. We've seen that in migration patterns to the U.S., people leaving their countries because of those same reasons. So this is an issue that is very much affecting every single corner of the country. But look, you asked, is this something where there can be bipartisan action on? And I think we hope there can be, but we still see a good amount of Republicans saying that climate change isn't real. So we have a lot of big issues to deal with, including here at home.
And LZ, this report also highlights the unequal effects that a warming climate has on people. This report indicated that people of color suffer more, as do people with lower incomes. And while that is being shown here, do you think that those impacts are otherwise being overlooked?
Well, absolutely. Particularly when you talk about how it impacts poor people, because the assumption is, well, of course, you can't use your air conditioning because you're poor. But it's way deeper than that. For example, in San Antonio, where I live, we had about 2 months of higher than usual summer weather that forced senior citizens to really try to decide whether or not they were going to keep their places cool or die in the heat. And unfortunately, we had many senior citizens die. So it isn't just about the poor in terms of young people who are poor. Our seniors who are on fixed incomes are also depending upon the government to make smart decisions about climate change because they're on fixed incomes and can't afford higher energy bills. And then, of course, the supply chain. John is absolutely right. We need more Republicans to take this seriously. Hopefully more will after this report, because we are really in a dire situation considering how much older the country is getting as a whole.
Yeah, certainly. People with fixed income forced to make some really difficult decisions in times like that. And Selena, to you, we heard John Podesta talking about what a big role China plays in those carbon emissions, and John touched on it as well. You're there at APEC, so what kinds of conversations do you think will come out of this Biden-Xi meeting tomorrow in regards to combating climate change?
Well, Kana, combating climate change is probably one of the few areas where President Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping can actually find some room for agreement. The U.S. and China are the world's top climate polluters, and there is an understanding that these two countries must work together in order to achieve a slowdown in global warming. Now, John Kerry, he is the U.S. climate envoy. He recently met with his Chinese counterpart, and he said the two countries have come to some agreements and understandings. That is a positive sign leading into this Biden-Xi summit tomorrow, but unclear what kind of concrete outcome they can come to when it comes to climate change. In fact, when it comes to the summit tomorrow, we should not expect any major breakthroughs. The purpose of Biden and Xi meeting is really to just get these two countries talking to each other more, to try and prevent crises. It's about having open lines of communication to prevent any competition from potentially veering into conflict. The best case scenario out of the meeting is that these two countries can restart military-to-military communications, but no one meeting, no matter how substantive, is going to solve all of the deep ideological differences between these two countries, Kana.
Yeah, certainly there's a lot to be ironed out, to say the least. Selena, LZ, John, and Peely, thank you so much for your time. And coming up next here, the Supreme Court adopts a code of ethics, and why critics are blasting these new rules. They're arguing they're nothing more than empty promises without the means of enforcement.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.